Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the CyberGizmo, I'm going to be looking at Fedora 33 Workstation right after this. So I guess maybe I should take and put this up here, since I'm going to be presenting a few things today, and I wanted to do Fedora 33 that came out yesterday, and so on October the 27th, 2020, and so I want to just go through some of the highlights of it with you. I'm probably not going to do a whole lot with the, with the UI for GNOME, but I am going to delve into a couple of technical things and do some engineering and compare and contrast some of the new features. So let's get started. So Fedora versions, as I have mentioned in the past, come out about every 6 months, but you can skip. They'll continue to support them for 13 months. So if you want to skip a version, it's fine. You can do that, and it's no big deal. But the release schedules are never quite a certainty. It could be a little bit more than 6 months. It could be a little bit less. But the Fedora team maintains a schedule of all their impending releases on their website. So if you want to know at what stages they are in a development of a particular release, you can look at that and track it as it moves through the system. So the requirements for Fedora 33 have changed just a little bit. The minimum requirements are still 1 gigahertz or faster CPU, and that was the same as it was in Fedora 32, but memory has gone up a bit. Now we're looking at 2 gig of memory instead of 1 for Fedora 32. They also require 10 gigabytes of unallocated disk space, and they still support a minimum screen size of 80 by 600. A lot of the other distributions are moving on to 1024 by 768. As we've seen in the past year, but Fedora still offers 800 by 600, and that will work just fine. However, the recommended requirements are for a 2 gigahertz dual CPU, 4 gig of memory, 20 gigabytes of available disk space, and a screen size of 1024 by 768. See, they did work it in. I didn't add this last time, and I saw it in the show in the release notes this time, so I thought I would incorporate this in case you are running on older hardware. So you'll need, if you're running on an Intel CPU with the inbuilt graphics that's inside the CPU itself, you'll need an Intel GMA 9XX or higher. And then if it's an NVIDIA card, you'll need an NVIDIA NV30 GPU, which would be found in the GeForce FX5's XXX series. Also, if it's a AMD Radeon, you'll need an R300 GPU, which you'd find that in a Radeon 9500 or higher, of course, for all of those. Fedora 33 is a distribution whose release forms the basis for Red Hat as well as CentOS. So yeah, you'll find that it makes changes to both of those, and it drives those changes forward. Now, not all the changes of Fedora make it into Red Hat or CentOS, but this is kind of the proving ground where they do experimentation to figure out what they should include in the next release. Fedora 33 is based on Linux kernel 5.8. It is at GNOME 3.38.1. And one thing to say here is that Fedora always uses a vanilla GNOME installation, so it isn't tweaked. They just provide it as is. Now, both Ubuntu and the Fedora team / Red Hat do a lot of contribution of code to the GNOME project. One of the big changes, though, is btrfs is now the default file system. And that applies both to the workstation as well as all the Fedora spins. So if you're familiar with Fedora spins, those would be desktop environments like Fedora KDE, Fedora Cinnamon, Fedora Mate, and so on. But it does not apply to Fedora Silverblue or Fedora Server, Fedora IoT, or Fedora Core OS, or any upgrades to any existing Fedora edition. So if you're on Fedora Workstation 32 and you upgrade to Fedora 33, btrfs is not going to replace your file system. The other thing they added was the Fedora Workstation adds Thermal D by default. In the past, you've had to install that in order to get proper proper readings from your CPU and other areas of your motherboard if they're supported, to collect temperature settings and then to trigger the fan control as required. Nano is the default editor, and I know that I have read on the forums and also from just general chat with some of the developers that is now the default editor. And the reason why they did that was they felt that they really needed to be able to open Fedora up to a wider range of users, including new ones. And they thought that maybe the default editor, which was Vi or Vim in the past, was just maybe too much for a new user to be able to figure out. So Nano is now the default editor, but you can change that if you want. There's of course a variable called all in caps editor, and you can change that to whatever your favorite editor might be. They also obsoleted the device mapper multipath. They found that was causing Fedora to boot slowly, and so they replaced that with a new package. Early out of memory detection is now in Fedora KDE. And of course, if you remember from my last time when the OOM made it into GNOME, what that basically does is it will look to see if there are applications that are taking a huge amount of memory. And if you approach the barrier where you start to run out of physical memory, then OOM will mark that task, come back around. If it's still there and still hogging memory, it might just throw it out. Just might toss it out of memory. The other thing is swap is now on ZRAM. However, that can be disabled, and of course you can reconfigure that to the file system or to a file, or however you want. The Anaconda changes is they now allow the boot partition to be btrfs. However, the default is ext4. There's also a platform abstraction for security, or parsec. That is used for IoT. And of course, the IoT is now available on Fedora. So if you want to add a layer of security to IoT, you can do that. Enough said from me. I'm not going to say anymore. Networking enables systemd resolved by default, and so that is now a service that is running. That wasn't previously. So what changed in the storage? So Stratus, I did a video on this back, I think it was in end of June, maybe 1st of July, where Stratus had made it to the stable status, and now not only is it stable, it's ready for experimentation. So, and this version 2.1 offers encryption, and the one I reviewed did not offer encryption. That was something that they had taken out because there were some bugs in the way that the encrypt.fs worked at the time, as you may recall. So, make 4.3, and you can read these as well as I can. BenUtils 2.34. Golang is updated to 1.15. And so forth. One of the big changes, though, is .NET Core is now available on ARM64. Also, Python 3.4 and 2.9 are retired. So if your code is dependent upon those, you may want to update or make sure that it is running on the latest Python 3.9. Of course, Python 2 is gone at the end of this year, is my understanding. So I guess we should probably take a moment. Let me get set up, and I'll go in to my virtual machine. I apologize. I still have my ZFS system is still taken up with, and I'm still testing. I'm waiting on the 2.0 version of ZFS that's supposed to drop sometime this week. It may even be right now. It may be out there, but it's supposed to drop sometime this week, they hope. And if it does, then I'm going to move over that file system to 2 and then test it and see how well that works. So I'm kind of holding that machine up. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm in Proxmox, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the install with you. So I'm going to just start from the scratch, and I'm going to call this Fedora B because I'm actually going to install btrfs. And I'll go to my NAS, as I always do, and choose Fedora 33. I had some problems with doing Spice on Fedora 33. There was a lot of screen tearing. Firefox didn't like it at all. It wouldn't update the full screen. It was losing stuff, and it just didn't work that well. So I did not try that on Xorg. Now, of course, Fedora, as you know, is based on Wayland by default, but the performance of it was not good. So I'm not going to try that again. We'll just try it this way. So I'm going to give this exactly the same parameters as I gave Ubuntu 2010. So I'll give it the same memory, the same number of cores, and I have a reason for that. So we'll wait until that builds out right there. Just waiting on it. Okay. So I'll go ahead and select that, and come on. There we go. Start. And let's see, I need to be able to scale this. And we'll get that up a little bit bigger so that you can see. So one of the things that you can do now is you can test the media. Of course, I think that was in the last release as well. Seems like all of the distros are doing this anymore, but I don't do that. I just look at the signature, the SHA-SUM. If it's the same, I mean, the code hasn't changed. So assuming that unless there's something wrong with the ISO to begin with, then yeah, there shouldn't be any need to do that. Unless you just want to. I just look at the signature. So I'll wait on this to come up for a minute. Now this is booting off of a NAS, so it isn't going to be too quick until I get it installed to the hard drive, which in this case is a crucial SSD. So now you could just use this as a live CD if you want. I'm not going to. I'm just going to go ahead and install it. Okay, so this is one of the typical questions that Anaconda always asks you: your language and your country. So we'll do that, and this is kind of simplified from the last time that I installed Fedora 32. I'm going to just take the defaults here. This is going to install btrfs. Now it should create a btrfs partition, and then under that partition it should create two subvolumes, one for root and one for home. And like I mentioned before, the boot partition will be on ext4. There won't be a swap partition because that's going to ZSys. Okay, we'll just wait for this to check, make sure the storage configuration is okay, and then we'll start the installation. I'm not going to hold you up, I mean, unless you really want to watch that, but I'll be back. Okay, so it's finished, the install, and we'll go ahead and just reboot it. Yeah, this one still has the power off and then the restart is in it. Yeah, still don't understand why that's there, but it's always been there, or at least the last couple of releases of Fedora. Okay, so I need to do a couple of things here to get this so that it's usable, but before we do that, they have a new, I'm going to turn off location. I am going to leave problem reporting on at least for a couple of weeks, and then I'll probably come back in and turn that off. Just to help out if I do find any bugs, so that I can send those off. And I'll create my user account. Okay. The setup is complete. So the next thing it will do, this is new, is it will kind of give you a brief starting tour. It's it's okay. It's nice. Here's how to get to your activities and launch your applications, how to do a search for applications or files or whatever, and then see your notifications, look at the system settings and some information about your system, and then finally to install apps, to use the store to do that. And then finally, thank you for choosing Fedora. But right now, the first thing I need to do is change this. So we'll get that up a little bit, and then maybe move that around a bit. Okay, so I'm done with that, I think. As far as the wallpaper is concerned, you might as well touch on that a bit. So they have a few variations of this one. I think this one has a little bit darker window on the bottom, so that if you do move your menu down to the bottom, and of course that is a tweak to do that, then you'll have that little black bar down there that you can use, or gray bar, I guess. First thing I want to do is come in here and enable the third-party and proprietary repositories, because I have some things that I want to install. Now, if you install your updates this way, which it's going to do, it will reboot your machine, and then it'll perform the update, and after that it will then reboot the machine back up again. I don't particularly like that. I understand that they do that, but I use DNF, but I'll run through it with you so you can see what it does. This will be a while too, so I'll be back. All right, so it's all done, and it's waiting for me to do a restart and update. You have to do it this way in order to trigger the restart and then the install of the updates, and so it'll immediately will restart the system. And I won't make you wait through all this, but I'll just show you what it does. If you haven't seen this before, this will take a bit, so I'll be back again. Okay, I think I probably was a little slow, but it went pretty quickly from 97 to 100 and then restarted. So right now it's bringing the system back up with the changes in it. And like I said, I understand why they do that. By the way, if you want to change from Wayland, because Wayland is the default, to Xorg, you can do that. And there's also a classic GNOME look as well. So if that is what you would like, you can do that. I don't think Wayland is going to give me any more trouble using just the default console. So then until it has a notification, you can review the changes that it made if you want. And you can go down through it. It looks like they updated Firefox. That should be to 82. I noticed that it was 81 after the installation. And then there was an update that it showed for LibreOffice as well. Just a patch update, I believe. Okay, so I think we're pretty much done with that. The next thing I want to do is, so you have all these same, if I can get a hold of it. I don't want to launch it. Let's try it this way. There we go. So you can still move things around, put things in together, that kind of stuff, just like you can on Ubuntu. But one of the things I need is this. And I'm going to bring down my activity menu and add that to favorites. And I can already see I need to do some adjustments on this. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up permanently. And besides, I want to show you something that is in here now. So on colors, when I normally turn off this one, but you'll notice that my terminal window immediately went to black over white background. So that's because these themes are now here. And I don't believe it was here before. I don't remember seeing the theme drop down before. So that's an addition to this version of the terminal. So I hope we can maybe bring that up just a little bit bigger for now anyway. So I guess the first thing I need to do is get some software installed that will help us figure out what's going on with the system. And I don't think I need OpenSSH server because I think that's out there already. It just needs to be enabled. And this will take some time too. This is not the fastest package installer, but in comparison to APT, it is just not as fast. And it's definitely not as fast as Pacman. Okay, it found it, so I'm going to go ahead and install it. This goes pretty quick, relatively speaking. Okay. So I guess the first thing we should go find out is how much memory we're using. Yeah, we're using about a gig. Now, before when I did this, it was under a gig. It was about 956 gigabyte, but I think because of the updates, it's, yeah, taking more memory. Obviously, this being a vanilla GNOME, I don't know what all the tweaks that Ubuntu did to their system to get it down to, what, 650 is what we saw. But obviously, those tweaks are not in this version of GNOME. So yeah, it's still taking quite a bit of memory, and some of that could be the swap. I mean, it could be. I don't know if it's actually using it, but we could probably find out. It's not using swap at all, but there is some reserved. So let's see. Let's see what some of the information here. Yeah, that's that's a little slower than I remember. NeoFetch coming back. 5.8.16 is the kernel, and Bash 5.0.17. Yeah, and then we can see. So that is a Fedora Core 33. So it has been modified as well, and probably configured for their drivers and what they want to have installed in the system. But we'll look at some of the usual things that I like to look at. So yeah, so if you need support, it's right here in the OS tree. So I guess the other thing to look at is glances and see what our app caches are taking. Yeah, so right here, 1.27 gig. I think that's a little bit lower than I remember on 32. I have to go back and look at the video, but I was thinking it was a little, maybe, I don't know, maybe 100 meg higher than that. Maybe 200 meg. But yeah, maybe that's just in the noise too. The other thing I want to do is do my usual. We'll get Linus down. Let's make sure. Yeah, it looks. Nope. Might want to give it a command. There we go. This laptop keyboard is not the best for touch typers. It's more of a mash it. Seems like some of the, I don't know if you guys are noticing this, but it seems a little sluggish with any kind of file reads and file writes. It doesn't seem to be real fast. I'm watching the CPU usage over here, and it's okay. I'm on the VM, but it is bouncing a bit. All right, let's take a look and see what we got here. So 68, and I'm going to scroll back up. I saw one warning. There it is. So this virtual bridge, that is for known boxes. So you could probably whitelist that out unless you don't want known boxes and you want to deinstall it. But that's where that's coming from. The rest of these, yeah, this is pretty typical stuff. I mean, it's not a bad score to start with. It was about the same as what Ubuntu 2010 was. I think the other thing I really want to do is I want to leave this here for a second. I want to make sure, so on my hardware, 4 gig, 4 CPUs, and then because I'm going to benchmark these and then I'll come back. Yeah, 4 gig. What I'm going to do is I'm going to benchmark the 2 file systems. Ubuntu's ZFS. This has ZFS installed on it, and this has the btrfs. So I'll bring them up one at a time, so nothing else is using the file system. I'll shut this one down, and in fact, I'm going to go do that right now. Oops. So I don't have anything on the file system at all because I am sharing the same drive. So I'll just get all the activity off of it. Okay. And okay, it's down. So the only thing running right now is Fedora. And then I will go set up for that. And I'll be doing my, let's see where to go. There it is. I guess I got to go here again. Okay. All right. So, and then I'll take and I'll install IO Zone. I don't think that is offered. If I remember right, I had to compile that the last time. So to be fair, I'll compile it on both systems so that if there are any, if there's any advantages to the compiler, and there could be. I mean, that does happen occasionally. Yeah, DNF is pretty slow. This is when you can go get coffee and come back. No matches. So IO Zone 3 is not there. So I will go download that and I will compile it. And then I'm going to come back after I get all my data together, and then we'll kind of talk about some of the differences between them. Yeah. So I'll be back. Okay, whew. That was a lot of work. Actually, it wasn't too bad. So let's talk about what I did. So you know that I run IO Zone 3, and then I run a series of tests that, yeah, it's a synthetic, but it's all going against the same. Each one of those VMs is coming up on its own. The other one's not up. And it's accessing a crucial SSD through the virtual manager, but KVM is direct. I mean, it goes straight to that drive. So there might be, I don't know, 10% difference in a CPU benchmark, but in a file benchmark, I doubt there'd be more than 1 or 2% difference between the two. However, so I ran exactly the same tests on Ubuntu 2010 with their ZFS, which is 0.85, is the ZFS utility. And then I ran the same set of benchmarks on Fedora 33 on the btrfs. Both of them ran out of the home directory. So yeah, both of them ran out of my home directory to do that. So I didn't set up any special file system, just did it on the home directory. If you're interested in my scripts on how I do that, I have a GitLab page, and it's out there, so you can download it from there if you wish. All right, let's take a look. So I ran the benchmark, and the first one is the fwrite, fread, and you probably remember that test is to look at some of the differences between a typical fwrite and an fread, which is a C write and a C read, which would be pretty typical of a Linux system of the applications that would normally be utilities. So the write is in both cases not stellar. So about 5,000 megabytes. Well, it's probably a little bit less than that. It's probably under. I don't know. I can't really tell, but it looks like it's about maybe 6,000, maybe 60% of the way up to 5,000. So that would put it, what, 3,500 or so. And this is the worker 1, worker 2, worker 3, worker 4, 5, and up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I must have the product worker in here twice. Yeah, I do. Oops. Oh, well. So the product is just the value, and that's it. But I did have it twice. That's why those two are exactly the same. But oh well. Next time I'll fix that. btrfs did a little bit better in the write on the fwrite all the way up. Now btrfs takes a while to ramp up, and so does ZFS really. Their sweet spots in both cases are about 4 to 5 users simultaneously. So, and then on the read, ZFS just pulls way ahead. It's up in the probably 21,000 megabytes per second range. Whereas btrfs, it kind of, I don't know what happened here on the worker 5. It looks like it just died. But 4, it was doing pretty good. Now, that might be it's having a problem with contention because the memory is fine. I monitored the memory, and I was kind of surprised that I could run ZFS in 4 gig. Normally, I wouldn't do that, but because the file system is only like 6.1 gig, and I should have showed you that, but the file systems on both are about 6.1 gig. That's not an appreciable amount of memory that the ARC and the Z logs are going to take. So, yeah, and it's not until you start moving up into the 40 and 50 gigabyte you start chewing memory up. So, yeah, it's sat, both of them sat in memory really nice. So this might be a contention problem or a locking problem, although I don't know why it would be locking on a read. Anyway. Clearly ZFS is faster in the reads. So then we have the mixed workload. Now that's reading and writing off the same file, and so it's reading it, it's going back and writing it, and going back and reading it, and just off and on and off and on. That might simulate workloads like with audio and video, where you're inserting stuff into the middle of the file. So ZFS pulls out to about maybe 480, maybe 460 up here, 460 on the 5 workloads, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sorry about the double, but it was a goof. btrfs, however, looked like it was struggling to even get to 270. Maybe 290 up here before, and then it isn't really doing very well in the mixed workload. ZFS again on the initial write, that's the initial write out to disk. This probably is noise, but clearly in the 1 workload and 2 workloads, it's doing good. It drops back a little bit, but it's slightly, I'd say this is a wash here. They're close, probably in the noise. On the writes for the initial write, they're both pretty close. But it takes btrfs a lot longer to ramp up. So if you're on a single user system and you're not doing a whole lot, you're probably going to be seeing performance numbers like that, is all I'm saying. P-write, this is buffered writes and buffered reads. ZFS is, it scales up nicely here and then stays pretty level. But btrfs is a little jagged. It again, slow to start up, kind of catches up here, and then for some reason, I saw this behavior before when I was benchmarking it the last time in against Stratus, and it did exactly the same thing, and then it kind of caught its breath and came up again. So I'm not sure why that does that, but it is kind of a strange behavior. But I'd say ZFS kind of edged it out here. And that it's kind of more stable. P-reads, clearly ZFS clobbered it. I mean, btrfs is struggling here to get up to the 250, 240, and then down here to maybe 205 or so. Yeah, it's struggling, clearly. It's struggling with the workload. Now, this again would be typical in Linux utilities. Buffered reads would be typical. Random writes, ZFS starts out here at around maybe 350, and then for the one, and then for the second workload it kind of jumps up to almost 480, and then falls back a little bit as the concurrency builds up, and it stays pretty good here. That could be, I didn't see any memory blocks, but it could be contention on that drive. You are running 5 concurrent IOs to an SSD, even though, so possible, I guess. btrfs is pretty, I'd say it kind of drifts up here a little bit and then kind of falls back again. But it's not, I wouldn't say that was stellar. That was doing a really good job here either. It's clearly way behind what ZFS is doing. And then same thing here for the random reads. Random reads or random writes you would find pretty common in databases, obviously, or if there's still people using random files, that would also be the case. btrfs is pretty flat. There's a little bit of a peak here, but for the most part, I'd say that's pretty flat. It doesn't seem to be able to get workloads above about 210, 220 maybe, whereas ZFS is scaling up really nicely until it kind of hits probably a channel peak would be my guess. Reads, same thing, it scales up nicely. btrfs seems to be kind of erratic here with the reads. Rereads, same thing, ZFS is scaling up. And it's kind of interesting that ZFS is on this series of benchmarks seems to perform about the same. I mean, it isn't necessarily beyond the realm of 500 megabytes a second, but it seems to be pretty consistent no matter what workload I'm pushing to it. It's taking it in stride, and it's just scaling up really nice and staying pretty steady with it. And whereas btrfs is clearly having some issues here in doing things. And so rewrites, so it kind of drops back as the workload, but then it kind of it gets kind of stable. btrfs does a lot better here. It's a little slow to start out, and then it kind of comes up and scales up pretty nicely as well. Doesn't quite reach, I mean, this is probably noise, but they're pretty close in performance here. btrfs is a little bit slower. ZFS scaling up again. This is the same pattern that we see over and over again with these benchmarks. Reverse read, btrfs once again having some problems trying to get its feet under it to do the workload when you're reading the file backwards. Again, that behavior is typical in the compiler optimizer phases. So that is not unusual to see that happen if you're compiling C code or C++ code. Stride reads, and this is where you are reading reading a block and then jumping ahead, or reading another block, jumping ahead, and reading another block. That's why it's called a stride. That's a database read very typically as it's trucking through its indexes. Again, btrfs is able to just kind of slide right up, handle the workload until it reaches probably the channel peak. And then same thing down here, the btrfs seems to be struggling. So, yeah, let me turn off my mini-me. So, I mean, clearly there are some areas where btrfs does well, and there's a lot of areas where it doesn't seem to do very well in the workloads that are being thrown at it. I would be a little concerned running btrfs on the root file system. If you want, I saw some of that sluggishness, and I was kind of wondering maybe btrfs was struggling a little bit. I don't know if it's a problem maybe that Fedora needs to address with btrfs. I have seen better performance out of it on other systems, and I don't know, maybe it's an issue with this particular patch set that they have released, and maybe they know about it, maybe they don't. But clearly there's something going on with some of these workloads that are doing where it's doing random and jumping around and reading backwards and doing strides. It's clearly not handling those kinds of workloads. But even on the P reads and the P writes, where you're just doing sequential reads and sequential writes with a buffer, yeah, it seems to be struggling there too. So I guess that's all I had for today. As for me, as you know, I love Fedora. I love working on it. And I'll probably move over my workstation back to Fedora 33. And of course, I don't think I'll be using btrfs though. Unfortunately, Fedora does not seem to have the OpenZFS packages in their repository, so I'll have to go hunt those down if I want to use ZFS. But I'll probably go back and just use XFS and ext4 for the boot. So that's all I had today. Please like and subscribe. Hope to see y'all again real soon, and bye for now.